Hi, hello, welcome or welcome back. My name is Yaneli, and today we're going to be looking at ilnp's two collections that they're releasing for the fall of 2025, and that is Thorns and Twisted. Now, Thorns consists of 4 crelly jelly polishes in the gothic color range, and then Twisted consists of 6 magnetic polishes that, well, yet again, took me out. I'm not gonna lie. I kind of have a love-hate relationship with magnetics. But anyway, as a disclaimer, I did not purchase this collection myself. ilnp was nice enough to send it over to me as gifted PR. I'm not obligated to post about it, talk about it, create content, or do anything with it, but I do want to showcase these polishes off to you. As usual, I will have comparisons and final thoughts saved towards the end, so stick around for that. Without further ado, let's get into swatches. Up first for Thorns, we have Dahlia, and this is a deep dark red polish, and on the first coat I did have some issues with me overloading my brush, causing it to be a little bit of a thicker coat. However, I did go back and remove any extra polish off camera, and as you can see on the first coat, it is a little bit patchy. I do have a textured thumb, meaning a lot of the polish likes to pool within those textures / indents, and as a result I usually get some patchy coats, especially with these deep dark red crelly polishes. Like, those tend to be my enemy when it comes to my thumb specifically, because my other fingernails are totally fine. They're not like smooth, like they still have ridges. However, it's not as severe as how my thumb is, where actual indents are in the mix. So I did go in with a third coat because the second coat still showed up patchy, and I wanted to see, 1, how much the color deepened, 2, could it cover up the majority of the patchy areas to where at a glance I didn't feel like I saw any patchiness and whatnot. And I feel like the third coat did succeed in that. However, at a deeper look, you can still see some patchiness. However, usually in the real world, no one's like scrutinizing your nail, so I think bystanders are not gonna notice the patchiness within the nail polish itself. But yeah, overall, really pretty color. I think I liked how it looked on the third coat. It built up very nicely while still maintaining that red hue. Here we have Ivy, and Ivy is this really deep, like extra deep dark green, and on the bottle it honestly almost looked like a deep dark teal. However, as you apply it on the nail, you see that color there, and on the first coat I would say it applied really nice, much better than how Dahlia performed, and this gave me hope that I would just need to do a second coat to get that full coverage. But as you can see, the polish tends to pool in my indents, causing it to be a rather patchy coat. With the second coat, the color really deepened itself, almost borderline black. Like, as a bystander, if I saw someone's nails with this shade, I would not have assumed that it is a dark green shade. It just looks black, and the only time I can see some of the green is around the edges, if that. I don't feel like going in with a third coat because I honestly can't see any patchiness with the second coat, but I feel like a third coat would just automatically make this a black polish because, like I said, it's hard to see the green. Next we have Nightshade, and this is the purple of the Thorns collection, and on the bottle it honestly just looked like almost a charcoal black. However, as you apply that first coat, you get a glimpse of that plummy eggplant type of purple, and similar to the other two we've swatched, this one also gave me a little bit of a patchy first coat, predominantly more visible near the nail tip and on the middle aspect of the nail. As you can see, the other areas are much darker, and then there's a couple spots that were lighter. Now going in with the second coat, it did give me that full coverage. I don't see any of the patchiness that I saw on the first coat. However, this one was the most like black polish colored that we've swatched so far. It's so hard to see the purple, and unfortunately there was no sunlight available for me to showcase these shades in the sun, and in the shade it's just gonna look like a standard black polish. Like, you're not gonna see those colors, and I wish I could because it would have been great to be able to see that. Rounding up the Thorns collection, we have Midnight Ink, and this is the dark navy blue polish of the collection. Now, again, similar to the other 3 we have swatched, this one does apply a little patchy on the first coat. However, look at how beautiful this shade of blue is. It's so nice to look at, and unfortunately my textured nails renders me useless in the application process. Those of you with really smooth nails, or if you use like gel overlay, or if you wear extensions, you're gonna have a much better application experience than I do, because again, these polishes really like to stay and gather in those indents of my nail, causing me to have more of a patchy look. So as I wiggle my nail around here, you do see a glimpse of blue hue transmitting out, but this polish does dry darker, and I feel like that's the same case with the others we have swatched. They tend to dry darker, kind of again giving the illusion of a black polish versus us being able to see that rich tones. Except for Dahlia. Dahlia was the one that didn't blacken itself as much as the other three have. Moving on over to the Twisted collection. Up first we have the most boring of the collection in my humble opinion. This is Overload, and this is a black base polish with a silver magnetic pole and a couple of multicolored glitters in the mix. On the first coat it applied nicely, however it did apply very sheer, and it almost applied like a gunmetal gray of sorts because of those silver pigments of the magnetic particles. On the second coat I ended up having much better coverage, however I did feel like it wasn't as saturated as I would have liked, and I also felt like there was a little bit of some patchiness near the tip of the nail. It's not visible on the camera, and for most this might have been a perfect coverage. However, I am one of those with too much in their gene and I want more. So I went ahead and did a third coat just to see how much more it darkened itself, and also getting that multi-dimensional look with the glitters being in between each coat. I do like the multicolored glitters that are in the mix here, and I also really enjoy how this polish looks unmagnetized. However, you're not buying a magnetic usually just to wear it unmagnetized unless you really like the look of it unmagnetized. Usually one purchases a magnetic polish because, you know, they want to magnetize it, right? And so seeing it in the velvet and cat eye effect really elevates this polish more. I feel like the multicolored glitters really adds to this what otherwise would have been a very basic black and silver magnetic polish. Moving on, we have Mood Ring, and this is what seems like a purple magnetic polish unmagnetized. However, when you magnetize it, you get that blue shimmer and the pink to purple magnetic pole. Now on the first coat, this was, I believe, one of the sheerest magnetics I've ever swatched, but memory could serve me wrong. However, this is still a very light and sheer polish on the first coat, and it was very patchy, of course. So going in with a second coat, it did elevate the color a little bit. However, I didn't feel like it was that full coverage potential that I would have liked. I feel like it still had room to grow, and so I went in with a third coat because the second coat still had some patchiness near the sides of my nail, and on the third coat I felt like the color was more vivid and I had that full coverage that I wanted. I definitely enjoy this polish, how it looks unmagnetized. It's a very pretty shade of purple, and then having those glimpses of the blue shimmer and the pink magnetic particle in the mix really adds a little spark in my eyes for this. So I'm not too mad about wearing it unmagnetized because I think it looks really pretty, and especially so when you put a glossy top coat on top, but also when you put a matte top coat, it almost gives it a chromy look or metallic. However, it really does look amazing when magnetized in the velvet and cat eye effect. It's giving Sailor Moon transformation sequence. If you know, you know. Next up we have Distorted, and on the bottle this looks like a dark purple / blue, maybe even indigo type of shade. However, when you apply it on the first coat, you see that dark murky blue base of sorts, and in the mix you have these orange shimmers and what looks like to be blue particles in the mix as well. On the first coat I did have really good payout compared to the other two, however it was still patchy and I needed a second coat. The thing that I noticed with this polish is that I felt like I only needed 2 coats for full coverage. It was saturated and vivid enough for me to satisfy my eyes, but also I felt like it looked really nice shifting shifting it around because you can get a little lime green type of shade as you wiggle your nail at extreme angles. But yeah, the shade is another pretty one in the mix here. When you magnetize it, you have the orange shimmer with the darkened base in the back end, and the magnetic pole is this like blue / purple type of color. I wouldn't call it indigo. There is a distinction, especially when you wiggle the nail around. You can see that one side is more blue, the other side's more of a purple. Moving on over to Madhouse. Now this is the shade that I was the most excited about based on the promo pictures in the brief that we were sent, because it showed this extremely lime green magnetic pole. And on the bottle, as you can see, it is predominantly green. However, it's more of a murky green. And within the polish itself, you see some pink sparkles in the mix, and it just looks very cozy. I don't know. And so I did need to do a second coat because the first coat was patchy, and I felt like I got full coverage on the second coat. I think this makes a great like subtle wicked nail design, specifically if you prefer green over pink, but it's also giving me a little bit of the watermelon lollipop with the pink bubble gum in the middle. Anyways, at extreme angles, I noticed that the green turns into a teal like shade. It leans a little more blue than green, but it's a nice change. Overall, I think this color is pretty. I don't think the green limey magnetic pole is as strong as it was represented in the brief photo we were sent, but it's still there, and it's still a nice shade to see the pink purple / orange shimmers behind the magnetic pole. Moving on to Radioactive. Here we have a olive green type of shade with these orange shimmers in the mix. Now this polish to me is giving me such a swamp vibe, and it's really just because of the shade of green that it is. Like, it's giving olivey, but it's also more yellow leaning, so it's giving a little bit more chartreuse. But overall, I felt like I got really good coverage on the first coat, like better than the others we've swatched of the Twisted collection. So when I went in with the second coat, I definitely felt that confidence in that I had that full coverage. And again, it's just, I'm shocked at how much I'm enjoying this shade. And at extreme angles, it also turns into this darker green color. It leans just ever so slightly blue, but it's so pretty. I very much enjoy this shade on magnetized and can definitely see myself reaching for it. However, when it's magnetized, I love the contrast of the orange shimmers. I love the green magnetic pole. Like, I am very impressed with this polish, and I'm also very shocked at myself at how much I enjoy it. Just came to the realization that this is very Shrek coded. Like, it's Fiona. This is Fiona's polish. The shade of green and the orangey red hair. Yeah, maybe that's why I'm into it. Moving on to Electroshock. Now this one to me almost gave me the pretense that it was a multi-chrome, and I mean, it technically has the attributes of multi-chrome shiftiness. It applies very murky on the first coat, and you get that like light blue shimmer peeking out of sorts, and you can see the gold shimmer aspects. Like, they're bigger shimmer particles than I'm like used to. Usually shimmer particles tend to be micro. However, ilnp did not shy away and gave us these larger particle gold shimmer pigment. And on the first coat, I did not have that great of coverage. It was patchy, but that's the case with all of these so far. And just as the others performed well on the second coat, this one was no exception. I do think that brushstrokes are more visible with this one than I have experienced with the others, so be cautious of how you finish off the nail. And even on magnetized, you can see the shiftiness of it. It's giving almost a chromy metallic look to it. However, my favorite way to have this is the velvet, because it allows that shiftiness to be more prominent, but also cat eye looks so cool because you get like these 3 lines of sorts. So the color hues of this is like pink, teal, purple, orange, yellow, and then plus the gold specks in the background. Moving on to comparisons, for Dahlia, I have here Holo Taco's Double Advocate and Holo Taco's I'm Over Brewed, and I wanted to showcase how these polishes look like on the first coat before the darkening aspect starts to happen on the second coat. And here you can see that Dahlia and I'm Over Brewed are both berry wine type of shades, with Dahlia being more saturated than I'm Over Brewed and Devil's Advocate being more of an oxblood red. And when fully brought on to coverage, I have have Devil's Advocate's more of that, again, true dark oxblood red. Dahlia is more of a wine red now, and I'm Over Brewed is very muted, but still of a wine red variety. So moving on to Ivy, I have here Hello Taco's Feral Forest and Hello Taco's Headhunter, and I wanted to compare the two because they are the darker green creme slash crellies of my collection. And here you can see that Feral Forest is more of a teal leaning green, and Headhunter is more of a mossy type of green. Ivy actually looks somewhat greenish around the edges, giving that like the green Hex Girl outline vibe of sorts, but it's still a pretty dark shade. And then I started comparing it next to another polish that has Ivy in the name, and this is Hello Taco's Ivy League. And then here I have Mooncat's Monster Under Your Head, and I just wanted to compare those two in terms of glitter colors, not so much in like wanting to find exacts, but like to give you a more range of like on the different shades of green and where Ivy falls into. Moving on over to Nightshade, I have here ilnp's Guestless and ilnp's Jinx. Now Guestless is of the darker purple variety, however nowhere near as dark as Nightshade, and also there's these pink shimmery glitters and some hollow in the mix. And then Jinx is much lighter, so not that close to Nightshade, and of course there's flakies and whatnot. Following suit with darker purples, I have here Mooncat's Raven and Mooncat's Nightcrawler. So Raven is my darkest purple, very similar to Nightshade in the terms of almost wanting to be a black polish. However, Raven does have some purple to pink micro shimmers throughout, and then Nightcrawler does have a gray base with purple shimmers in the mix. Moving on over to Midnight Ink, I have here Hello Taco's Indigo Away and Hello Taco's Shady Navy. Indigo Away is technically my darkest blue, however compared to Midnight Ink it's not that dark. And then Shady Navy, I'm shocked at how bright it is. In my mind I don't remember it being that vibrant of sort, but when you put it next to a very dark blue it definitely stands out. And then I started comparing it next to some glitters, and I have here ilnp's Late Night and Hello Taco's Playing with Sapphire. Late Night is a dark blue variety, however not as dark as how Midnight Ink appears. And then Playing with Sapphire technically has a black base with those blue flakies and glitters and the like. So I think Late Night, if it was just a simple plain crelly, would be very close to Midnight Ink. So moving on over to the Twisted collection, up first we have Overload, and for that I have Hello Taco's Waste of Space and ilnp's Moonlit. Now on Magnetized, they're not as near to each other, but Waste of Space does have the base of Overload, essentially a black base with multicolored glitters. However, when I add a magnetic taco to Waste of Space and magnetize everything else, it kind of looks pretty similar. I think Waste of Space plus the magnetic taco has more silver pigment in the mix, but Waste of Space plus the topper is very close to Overload. And then Moonlit is over on its own here, where it does have a dark base, but it's not as dark as Overload. And then I started comparing it next to Mooncat's Imperial Stormtrooper and Hello Taco's Greyt. Greyt predominantly because on its own, on Magnetized, Overload does have a gunmetal gray aspect to it, and I feel like Greyt kind of represents that a little bit. However, Greyt doesn't have those multicolored glitters in there. And then Imperial Stormtrooper is both a magnetic and a thermal, and on Magnetized it's nowhere near as Overload, but even when magnetized it's nowhere near Overload, so it's just there for vibes, you know. Moving on over to Mood Ring, I have here Hello Taco's Off the Grid and Hello Taco's Cool Cat Mom. Of course I wanted to compare Hello Taco's Cool Cat Mom because in essence they have the same attributes, a purple with pink and some blue. However, Mood Ring is more saturated and vivid compared to Cool Cat Mom, which is more diluted and muted of sorts. It's not as contrasty. And then Off the Grid does have a slightly blue tint to it because of the glitters in there. However, it's very different compared to Mood Ring. And then I started comparing it next to Mooncat's Everybody Scream and Mooncat's Ghost Ship, as I felt like the purples were really similar to how it looks on Magnetized. So Everybody Scream does have some glitter attributes in there. It's not magnetic, and it does have like a little blue shimmer going throughout, similar to what Mood Ring does. And then Ghost Ship gives it more of a metallic purple because of the silver magnetic pull. And then the blue aspect of Ghost Ship is much more demure than how Mood Ring has it. Moving on over to the Distorted, I have here Mooncat's My Everything You Fear and ilnp's Hypnosis. So for My Everything You Fear, I picked this one because it's technically a bluish base with these pink to orangey shimmers going throughout. And then ilnp hypnosis, I thought they would be a lot closer in my opinion, because hypnosis does have these little orange shimmers, and then the magnetic pole is technically blue/teal. However, when compared next to distorted is more vivid of the two, and the orange shimmers are more prominent in a darker base in the background, and then the blue/purple magnetic pole is different. Then for Madhouse, I have here ilnp's radioactive and moonkat's mutiny. So I wanted to compare ilnp's radioactive to Madhouse because they are two greens in the same collection. However, radioactive is of a chartreusey green, a little more yellow leaning, whereas Madhouse is more of a watermelon green of sorts, at least unmagnetized. And then moonkat's mutiny is a green magnetic as well, and I felt like the colors were slightly similar to Madhouse, so I wanted to see how those two looked next to each other. Once magnetized, you can really see the difference or similarities here, with the magnetic particles being pulled to radioactive. It still has a chartreusey color to it of sorts, but the base color is different in that the color is orange versus pink or purple like how Madhouse is, and then mutiny has a dark teal base with the magnetic pole colors just being slightly different. So moving on over to radioactive, I don't have anything else to really compare it to, so I'm just comparing it to polishes unmagnetized, and here I have Phobes Among the Foliage and Hollow Taco's Peridon't Bother Me. Now, Among the Foliage is not released yet, but I did get the okay from the maker that I am able to like post about it kind of thing. But in terms of comparisons, I think Phobes is more chartreuse-like versus radioactive, and then radioactive and Peridon't Bother Me are kind of like siblings of sorts. One of them is just more into the darker side of things, and the other one likes bright colors. And then I started comparing it next to Moonkat's Alien Invasion, as they again have similar vibes when radioactive is unmagnetized. However, I'd forgotten how blue of a base Alien Invasions has, but the shimmers are kind of close in my opinion. And then for electroshock, I have here Moonkat's Meowtek Industries and Moonkat's Curiosity's Trap. So Meowtek Industries has a similar shifty attribute and color range as electroshock when unmagnetized, like the teals, the pinks, the purples, and the blues and stuff. And Curiosity's Trap, I mainly grabbed it because of the gold aspects that it has, and I wanted to see how it compared to the gold aspects of electroshock. However, when magnetized, Curiosity's Trap has a blue base and the magnetic pole is gold, and then Meowtek Industries is not magnetic. And so then I started comparing it next to Meowtek Industries Twin, which is 404 Soul Not Found by Moonkat, and that one is a magnetic with again similar shifty attributes as Meowtek and as electroshocked. However, 404 doesn't have the gold shimmer in the back end, it's just a predominantly dark base, but I would say the magnetic pole is slightly similar. And that concludes the swatch and comparison portion of this video. So specifically for Thorns, I really enjoy my dark moody colors. However, Thorns kind of almost crossed a boundary, or maybe they did cross a boundary, of wanting to be a dark color versus wanting to be a dark black polish with some colored as a tint. So for me, Dahlia was the only one that I felt like was a true dark red, in the essence that I could see the red and not have to have a certain type of lighting to see that dark red. The other three, however, were on the spectrum of being a black polish, and especially as you build it up some more, like they became more black polish adjacent, and only at like the edges of your nail could you see a tint of color, similar to how if I were to dye my hair right now with like splat red or blue color and not bleach my hair but just apply the color directly, I would not see that color until I'm out in the sun or a certain type of lighting, and you would see kind of like a little outline of the tint of the color that I attempted to dye my hair. Like that's how those three polishes felt like for me, and so I didn't really like them that much in that regard, because I want to be able to see the color. I want to be able to see the dark green, the dark blue, the dark purple, or whatever, like what Dahlia does. Like Dahlia, I was still able to see the dark red. Now for Twisted, I am currently biased in the sense that I am tired of magnetics. I'm tired of swatching them and me having to swatch them back to back for this video, thus alter my mood and how I feel about them. However, I keep notes of when I first saw the brief, and I know I was excited about these. And when I was watching them, like, that excitement still rang true. However, it's when you kind of look back and you're like, damn, that was a lot of magnetics to do. So that kind of dampers my mood a little bit. I do appreciate that ilnp does fun variations for magnetics. My statement still rings true in Overload being the most boring magnetic of this collection, because when you compare the other 5, you're getting a shifty magnetic pole of like teal pink and other variations of blues with an orange shimmer and so on and so forth. Like, you're getting variation versus a black base with a silver magnetic pole. Like, that is the basics of basic magnetics. And I like the colors of the magnetics. I think they apply nicely, but at the end of the swatching sesh, essentially, I am tired out by magnetics. In terms of food, I feel like they should be kind of like a special seasoning kind of sprinkled in every once in a while. It's tough when it's the full course meal kind of thing, if that makes sense. But yeah, those are my thoughts. Again, let me know any and all your thoughts. Will you be getting either of these collections? Will you be saving any of them for Black Friday? Because ilnp does do a Black Friday sale, and it's a pretty darn good sale. I usually stock up on like their top coat, base coat, and whatnot during that time. And occasionally, if I'm feeling spicy, I'll actually purchase a polish or so. And the great thing about ilnp is that they don't discontinue shades, at least not to my knowledge. I don't know if there are plans for it later on, but as far as right now, ilnp has not discontinued anything. Nothing has been limited edition, so these polishes are here to stay. You know, you can take your time, make informed decisions on whether or not you want to purchase these polishes. Don't fall into the hype of people like getting their polishes, because I know people can subject themselves into purchasing something just because they keep seeing it. Like, truly, you know, take your time, focus on if it's actually something you want, if it's something that you actually feel like needs to be in your collection kind of thing, and if you know it's going to bring you joy. So stuff like that. But yeah, if you'd like to see more ilnp swatch videos that I've done, you can click here and it'll take you to a playlist. Or if you'd like to see other videos that I've done with other brands, you can click here. I'll take you to my profile. Don't forget to follow me over on Instagram. I tend to do more nail art over there. However, nail art is slowly being introduced into this YouTube channel with me streaming some nail art stuff. So keep an eye out for some streams that I will schedule out hopefully soon, if not today. Wink, wink. Me saying wink, wink, and then not winking whatsoever. Anyways, thank you so much for watching, hanging out, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.